Awesome. Paige Alcoholic got you on the record. All right. So I guess where we're picking up, page 80, second paragraph. And so where we're going to be is right in the middle of step 9. And the person who I know did a phenomenal job before me would have been leading us into this paragraph with actions that we need to take before making amends. But I'll just stick to what I'm supposed to stick to. All right. So this brings to mind a story about one of our friends. Now, one of the things I will point out is I believe that this story is referencing an anonymous gentleman who was likely a member of the Oxford group. Now, if I'm wrong, I have a couple history husbands that are here that will correct me. I don't stand a whole bunch, but I do stand to be corrected. Some of you get that joke. uh, I'm always here to be wrong. So this brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. And so as we get into this part of the book, what we're seeing is the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it gives us information. So it's going to give us practical information, which we saw at the very top of page 80, which is like, before we go make an amends that could affect other people, let's get their consent. If we have their consent and we've consulted with others, we've prayed, and we have that feeling in the depth of our gut that we've got to go make the amends, let's go make the amends. That's sort of the pre-amends directions that it's giving us. But then it always follows up directions with an example. Because here in Alcoholics Anonymous, what we do is we share our experience, strength, and hope. And many of us have been doing and going to big book studies for years and years, but many of us can't remember some of the factual information. And wait, what's the order of this and that? But we can remember stories, because stories have an impact on ourselves and on our lives. And I can see myself in the stories. You know, we probably didn't remember much from of our early meetings that we went to, but we might have heard a story that closely paralleled ours. And so we're going in and describing the story. And so here is a guy, and again, we're talking about step 9. So step 9, and it's a story to illuminate how we can make some of these difficult amends. And we have this guy, and this guy was probably a member of the Oxford group. And so while he was drinking, he received money. Now I'm going to point out, from a bitterly hated business rival. So he and this guy are butting heads. He probably came up on his 4-step inventory. I'm just going to throw that out there. You decide whether that's true or not. Well, if he was in the Oxford group, it wasn't quite as linear as that. But, you know, that's what we're rocking and rolling with. And so he received the sum of money, and he did not give him a receipt for the money. So this was in a business transaction. And so he gets the money. He doesn't give him a receipt. He then uses that as a basis for discrediting the man. So he's like, my bitterly hated business rival, do you know what he did? He didn't pay me. He discredited me, or he didn't pay me. He's a big smelly jerk in business. That's how businessmen talk. They wear ties and they go, business, 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 smelly jerk, money. You can tell I'm not a corporate person. But he basically is like, no, he didn't give me any money. And he used this incident, this wrongdoing where he lied about having received the money, as an opportunity for slandering the man. Now, I emphasize this, and I'm breaking this down because I want us to know what the harm is. The real harm was not financial. In fact, it was probably a business transaction. And like, he wasn't affected financially in that way. The real harm that he had to make right was about destroying the reputation. So his harm was character assassination. In fact, I'm going to throw it out there. It was a little bit of projection. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, oh, this guy, he's so dishonest about his finances and money as he stole the money and is lying about it. I'm sure none of us relates to taking our own inventory and finding that I maybe project my own wrongdoings onto others. We'll talk about that next week when we get into what to do about infidelity. Woohoo! That's maybe not the right vibe, but that's why Howard put the tent up there, the circus tent, like, woo, infidelity, not the vibe, not the vibe. So that's like me showing up to this paragraph and going, woo, fraud, not the vibe. All right. So it says, so that's the context. The real harm was the reputation destruction. In fact, his rival was ruined. So it says he felt he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. And I think we know what that's like. I'm gonna just suppose that some of us have those amends that are on our heart, that are on our gut. You know, it's one of those things like, how do I know when I owe an amends? It's we come to a study like this and we hear some Looney Tune like me natter on about amends, and we get the twisties and the resisties. That's how I know I owe an amends. Oh, I never have more digestive issues than when I show up to a meeting and we're talking about step 9 and I got an amend that I'm trying to avoid. I know that you guys can't relate to that. You guys make all your amends right away. But I'm just telling you how I've done it, you know, with the twisty and the resisty and bleh, you know. So, so he felt he'd done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, his business partner. I'm throwing that out. So he was afraid. And there's a lot of times we come to amends with, man, if I reopen that old wound, I'm going to cause more harm. But I promise more often than not, that is not the case. He was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. He's like, I'm going to be financially destroyed and ruined. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? And so I want to point this out because a lot of what he is bringing forth in this paragraph is so human. It is the resistances and the barriers that we have to the 9th step. And I know what it's like when I've got an amends to make. And some of you guys, I was joking about this. I think I was working with the sponsee and joking about this. But when we're sitting down and we have an amends to make, and we got the twisties and we got the resisties, and I am terrified. You know, I'm going to make an amends to my mom, who loves me, but I'm like, she's calling the cops. The SWAT team's coming in. They're busted in the windows. You know what I mean? I am throwing out that like the worst case scenario. Like it's bad. It's gonna go down. I'm gonna be sentenced to a Siberian gulag. It's like, what? You just didn't show up on time to work. What are you talking about, Paige? Like I blow it out of proportion. And then we do this thing where we assume, we put ourselves in the mind of the person. Well, you guys don't do it because you're lovely and you would never, but I'm a weirdo. When I put myself in the mind of the other person and I'm like, oh, I cannot make amends to them. It is Arbor Day. I can't reach out to them on Arbor Day. They're so busy with trees because that's what Arbor Day is about. No, I couldn't possibly. You know, and there was that time I got drunk and I peed on their carpet. Oh, I can't reopen that old affair. That will traumatize them. You know, I take a thing and I blow, and I know some of you guys are related. You're like, yeah, I was like, I can't reach out. It's March Madness, you know? Can't do it. I can't, not during the NCAA basketball championship. It could not, or like if we owe an amends to Rob, we can't do it. It's the hockey. It's the Stanley Cup final. We can't make amends to Rob. He's so inundated with sports. You know, and I create these scenarios that are going to happen. And I will let you know, they don't happen 98% of the time. They do not happen. I'll throw it out there. Does not happen. I'm not getting arrested. Rob can take time out of his hockey for the amends. He can't see. Uh, Arbor Day, while I do respect the importance of Arbor Day, we can cut some time out for Arbor Day to make the amends. And it is that thing where it's consent. A lot of times, I'm just sharing with you some of my experience with this. A lot of the times I show up with this idea of what I think it's going to be and how I think it's going to go. And I use that as a way to dig in my heels and to stop and to stop and to stop, and I can't do it. But if all I do is the top of page 80, what if I just could secure their consent? What if I just reach out to them and I acknowledge, hey, I know you're busy with all your Arbor Day plans, but I do owe you an amends, and I would like the opportunity to sit down with you and make it right. And if Arbor Day doesn't work, please let me know if there is another time that you would be open. Wild. And the first time that sort of clicked, it's like, I could do what? Well, at first it's like, ugh, don't offer that logical solution to the barriers that fear has tried to create in my life. Gross. But it is that simple. I can just get their consent. And here's the thing, I'm just gonna let you illuminate some of the truth out of my experience. If it's going to be a dumpster fire of an amends, they're probably not even going to meet you in the first place. They're not open to receiving it. Just throwing that out there in my experience. So if they're even open to meeting you, you got some pretty good odds. And so he is stuck and being held back. I love you. He is stuck and being held back by his fear and his projection of what it is going to be. And he's like, how could I do this? So it goes on, third paragraph, because Howard said I could take 3. I'm an alcoholic. You can give me an inch, I'll take a mile. Not diagnostic of alcoholism, but helpful to understand the selfishness and self-centeredness that pervades me. Give me a little, I'll take it all. Thank you. And then I'll come back around and make an amends for it is what I'll do. So third paragraph, because we want to tie this story up. So after consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion. So he spoke with his wife. He spoke with his business partner, and it is indicative that they were open to, like, yeah, you can make this thing right. That it was better to take those risks than stand before his creator, capital C, creator, guilty of such ruinous slander. He knew that he had to at least attempt to make it right than try to pretend. Man, there's nothing worse than the amend that I'm trying to minimize and avoid. There's nothing worse. It's like this little monster that's in my closet that's like yelling at me. Oh gosh, actually, you know what it's like? I am so sorry. I shouldn't make this reference. I feel bad as it's coming out of my face. It's like a scary clown in the sewer that's like, hey. Yeah, we were talking about the fear of clowns before the meeting. Hey, I'm here. I'm that amends you don't want to make. And it's like, oh no, and that scary clown of the amends. I am so sorry. If somebody needs to do some inventory about me and about clowns, I will help you after this big book study. I am so sorry. Oh gosh. Whose fault is this? Technically Kathy, but then Howard consented. So if you have any umbrage, Howard asked me, I think it was Kathy's idea. So she's the one that put us up to this. I'm good at taking personal responsibility as well. But yeah, the amends that I do not want to make really is that clown that's following me and following me and following me. And I can't get free of it. And so he sees that he cannot stand before his creator. He can't stand before God, guilty of such ruinous slander. And I talk about this quite a bit. There's that saying that fear and faith cannot live in the same house. And we're going to tie this into this next line. But that's not my experience. My experience is that, of course, fear and faith can and must and do live in the same house. You see, on page 68, in Fears, it talks about all men of faith have courage. All men of faith have courage. It is not courageous to get out of bed in the morning, except when it is. It is not courageous to go make an amends, except in this case, it is. And let's be real, it is tremendously courageous to make an amends. That's what we're all, I don't mean to sort of like lift the veil behind everyone's inventory. It's a Wizard of the Oz sort of vibe, or the find out the bearded guy is fake. I don't know. I was trying to work it into a circus thing. I didn't quite have the thing to land at home. But the truth is, our two biggest fears, so our two biggest resentments, mom and dad and the ex. That's how that goes. Our two biggest fears are rejection and abandonment. Almost every single time, rejection and abandonment. If you're like, okay, what are you afraid of? Rejection, abandonment. And so why am I afraid of amends? I'm afraid that I'm going to go and I'm going to be rejected and I'm going to be abandoned. That's my fear in a lot of cases. And so there's this idea that like this is an act of faith. And to have faith requires courage. If I do not have courage, which is to say, if I'm not afraid of it, I can't have courage. If I'm not afraid of taking the action, it does not require courage. And if I don't have courage, I don't have faith. What I have is trust. I have trust. And the more that we make amends, the less faith I need and the more trust I have in the loving higher power, God, creator, spirit of the universe that works in and through us and in and through this process. But here's what I know to be true: self-centeredness and God cannot, and serenity cannot live in the same house. You see, I cannot experience that. I can't live with a clown in the closet of my spiritual house and feel the nearness of my creator when that guy's like, hey, I'm the amends you need to make. Like, I can't. I didn't think, by the way, if you're like, oh, did she plan this bit? I'm sure it's apparent to everyone. I did not. There was no planning of the bit. And yikes. So, yeah. Maureen's got the balloon. Yeah, you know what's up. Oh gosh, like they're not gonna have me back because Howard's gonna get a whole bunch of complaint emails about like, I was just having nightmares the whole time after you had Paige come. I kept dreaming about clowns. But don't worry, he doesn't always get to his emails right away. So it'd be a lot of complaint emails before he doesn't have me back. Terry's got, and actually, if you need, I do have a sponsorship complaint form that I made for my sponsees. I'll share with you guys that later. It's good. All right, so he saw that he would have to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. And that is the reality. You see, if I have the illness that is alcoholism is laid out in this book, my step one experience is that I will drink again. Anything less than all 12 steps as a way of life, and I will drink again. Anything less than a spiritual experience that I grow and deepen and develop, and I will drink again. And how often have we either been or we worked with people that said, I've come to AA and it didn't work, only to ask them some questions about what they did. And to be honest, what they did not do in Alcoholics Anonymous, like all of the steps. You don't hear of people who relapsed, who were actively sponsoring others, had a daily prayer, meditation, inventory life, who had made all their amends, that had done, like, it's usually, I maybe did some of a fourth step. Maybe I made, and I know you guys would never go through with this sort of pattern of behavior. We make amends to some of the fam jam, and then we put that in the closet and try to avoid it, and like, let me move on to sponsoring because I don't want to do it, like, I'm not you guys, but some weirdo like me tried to do that, So what do I have to do? He saw that he had to soon place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. And you see, what does my life look like in my hands? When my life is in my hands, I am drinking, and that is inevitable. But here's my experience. Before I take that drink, my life in my hands looks like restless, irritable discontent. It looks like an emptiness and a loneliness and a desperation within my soul. It's like I'm a raw, exposed nerve ending, and for some ungodly reason, the wind is blowing. It is the clowns that are on me, the clowns in my mind, the clowns in the closet, the clowns that are on me, and I cannot escape from them. You know, you guys feel like that? Because that is what happens when my life is in my hands. How do I get my life out of my hands and put it in God's hands? I take the actions of the steps. I do the amends that I don't want to do. And the outcome, that's not my business. I got fired from the management position of my life. I got fired, my pink slip, my P45. I got that in step 3. The results, that's upper management, baby. And I was fired. Results is God's business. So how do I put the outcome in God's hands? How do I put myself in God's hands? I take this course of action with complete abandon. I make that amends with complete abandon. And it's okay to do it afraid. In fact, how could we not do it afraid? But the act of faith is doing it anyways. It says he attended church for the first time in many years, which kind of tells you how he was doing. And after the sermon, which, by the way, I'm going to point out that is polite. Don't interrupt, because I know it. Listen, when I'm on the like when I'm approaching an amends, and this is really helpful if we've been sober a while and we have a couple amends that we have left to make. I want us to be really intentional about how we approach the amends, because the amends process is a microcosm for what happens when people get sober. What I mean by that is you'll come to a meeting like this and you'll hear some weirdo like me natter on about step 9, and a window might open for you. A window where we're willing to make the amends. We feel that like surge of like, okay, F it. You know, and it really, in my insides, it's an F it. F it, dive in, let's go. And I've learned that I have to move within that window of willingness. I have to take that action while the window is open. But if I start to delay, to avoid, to put off, man, the window closes. And it's just like that when we work with other people, when they are new and they burned or coming back and they've burnt their life to the ground. A window opens. And that window, and if we take enough action, we can get them through quickly and thoroughly so that they are able to be in the place of grace, that position of neutrality where they are able to stay sober. But that window will always close. And if we delay, it'll close. And I will drink again. So it's a little microcosm. So after the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action meant widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. See, the result in God's hands was better than anything he could have imagined if he takes that leap of faith. Now, I wanted to explain, because there's a lot of times we read this and it's like, wait a minute. He just showed up to church and told the church people that he had done something bad. What sort of amends is that? I want to tie us back. The harm that he made was reputation destruction. And in the 1930s, possibly 1920, no, it would have been the 30s, I figure. In the 1930s, very possibly, maybe like 1920s, but I'm thinking this happened in the 30s. The church had a more cultural place in the United States. So it was much more of a social thing. So if you're in your community, you would often go to your community church. And so if you had to make a public statement to say, here is what really happened, to set right the reputation, well, he goes to church. And that's where all those people would be in the community who had known of and who had heard of and who had bore witness to, and all the slander that he had put out into the world. So him going to church to make a confession wasn't a confession in the 5th step sort of sense. It was a way in which he could expediently make it right. Amends is not an apology. And it's okay if there's an apology in it. But an amends is deeper than an apology. An amends is an acknowledgement of the harm and an attempt to restore what was hurt or broken or damaged. And even though this doesn't like the perfect Why am I here? What I did, being specific, focusing on my defects of character. What is there anything else? What can I do to make it right? It doesn't follow that same formal structure, but what we can see is a way that he showed up, bore witness, and set right the wrong. And that's what we're here to do. So I got a minute left. That seems, although I'm pretty sure you gave me a little extra time. I think I caught that. So I think I will be quiet because I think that is my time. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And again, apologies about the clowns.